Hey, and welcome back to the Growing Pains podcast. I'm your host, Alyson Caffrey, and I am sitting down with my incredible friend all the way back from college, you guys, Samm Magpie. So I am so excited to connect with Samm on the podcast. Honestly, we've been trying to make this work for a little while for you guys because Samm has a midwifery in just outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where we grew up. And Samm and I met back in college, probably in like 2010, 2011. And she and I have both kind of grown apart and then found each other back again in this really interesting space of like moms and planning for maternity leave and planning for birth and all of these different things. And so it's been really fun to reconnect with Samm. I was really excited to hear her full story of like how the business came to be, but she has got a booming midwifery practice. And we talk a lot about her role as mom and her role as midwife in these really, really special moments in her clients' lives and what that means and how she sets up her boundaries and what she's excited about for the future. We also, of course, talk about natural birth and how incredible it is and how empowering it is to be actually giving birth to a new life, no matter how that works out for you. And I'm just so excited to have you guys listen to this episode because it's super fun. So Samm's official rap sheet is she's been supporting growing families since 2012 when she was just 19 years old. She started as a doula and a birth photographer and then became a childbirth educator and began her apprenticeship as a home birth midwife in 2016. Samm started her midwifery in 2019, initially as a low volume solo practice, which quickly grew into a busy community based home birth practice where she currently serves 50 to 75 families a year. You guys, this is like big time. For the past 5 years, she's been hosting prenatal potlucks, classes, and more for her clients. However, she's always envisioning making her services more accessible to those outside of her practices, leading her to start the Matrescence Collective, which I'm really excited for you guys to hear about from Samm in the episode. When she's not catching babies or doing prenatal visits, she's traveling the world with her family and friends, homeschooling her 3 kids, indulging in some self-care, taking Pilates classes, trying new restaurants with her high school crush turned life partner, or simply relaxing in absolute silence. You guys, I really hope you enjoy this episode and I'll see you inside. Samm, welcome to Growing Pains. I'm so excited to have you.
Thanks. I'm excited to be here.
Okay, so we have known each other for like 15 years at this point, maybe 14
Oh
years.
gosh, that makes me feel so old.
We met in college through mutual friends, which is so exciting. And both of us have kind of found ourselves in this cool and rare moment where our work has crossover in some fun and meaningful ways. So I'm excited to talk with you today about like how you got into building the wonderful, thriving midwifery that you have today. But first, for folks listening who don't know yet about you and all the wonderful things that you do, can you just tell us a little bit about your business and the family that you have at home?
Yeah, so I am a home birth midwife. I have been serving families as a birth worker for the last 12 years. So I was 19 when I started attending births, and I opened my own midwifery practice in 2019, right before the pandemic, and it quickly grew into a pretty busy home birth practice in the Philly area. I had my first son when I was 22, right, 3 years as I had gotten into birth work. And then I had my daughter right as I graduated midwifery school and started my practice. And then I had my last baby as the pandemic was ending in 2021. So I've been busy for the last 10 years.
Oh my gosh, like probably nonstop, right?
Yeah, probably. I mean, it's kind of ebbed and flowed organically, but yeah, definitely nonstop.
How did you know that you wanted to get into birth work?
That is a great question. I did not know that I wanted to get into birth work. Birth work chose me. It was definitely, as soon as I graduated high school, I had thought about, like, let me go into nursing. Everybody goes into nursing. So I started taking, prerequisites to become a nurse. And it was, my uncle's very like crunchy hippie neighbor came over for like a Labor Day barbecue. And she was just like, you need to be a midwife or a doula. Like, I totally see you doing that. And I mean, she's just telling me about home birth and catching babies in bathtubs. And at the time I was like, this lady's nuts. Like, okay, it's like, that's cool. But if you had asked me, 11, 12 years ago, I would have been like, sign me up for a C-section. Like, birth is scary. Like, no, thank you. And so I went home and I had started becoming more interested in natural things, just like natural medicine and holistic healthcare and, natural products. So part of it kind of sparked my interest, and I found a doula training that was actually coming up the very next month. So I signed up for that. And I mean, like instantly, it was just like, oh my God, why have I never been taught any of this about birth, about women's health? Like it was so empowering, and just being around moms and all of these, like-minded people. And I mean, it was, it was the first place I had ever, felt like, oh my gosh, this is my calling in life. So I quickly, started attending births for friends and, just people I knew in the community that were pregnant. Any in I could get to be at a birth, I would. And I loved it. And then I saw my first home birth and I was immediately sold. And I was like, that is what I was put on the planet to do. So, yeah.
So were you doing a mix of like hospital and home births in the beginning?
So I was only doing hospital births, and it was probably 2 years into attending births. I was probably like 20 or 21 when I saw my first home birth. And as soon as I saw it, I was just like, there's nothing more that I want to do in life than that. Like that was just the most incredible thing that I had ever seen.
So then what was next? It was midwifery school, right? So I know
So
you traveled,
as
right?
soon
For
as
midwifery school?
yeah, so I mean, as soon as I figured out that I wanted to become a midwife, and specifically a home birth midwife, I, signed up for midwifery school. And, Johnny, my partner, and I was like, I had gotten an apprenticeship in Oregon, and I was like, we have to move to Oregon. And literally like the week before I started midwifery school, I found out I was pregnant. And I was like, there's no way I can do this. So I started a midwifery school that was all online, and then I put it on hold. I had my son. And as soon as I had him, I was just like, oh, I definitely have to do this, but I have no idea how I'm going to do this now. Like I really just felt stuck. And I was, we were 21 or 22. We lived with our parents. We didn't have any money. And I was just like, I'm just going to have to put this on the back burner. Like there's no way I can actually do this. And I had wrote my birth story and posted it on my blog. And my midwife, my home birth midwife, reached out to me, and she was just like, I want you to be my student. And to me, that was like the biggest honor, because she was just this awesome midwife who had been in practice for over 35 years. And, she was just such an inspiration to me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, she's asking me to be her student. Like that's a huge deal. Like most people beg to be students for the midwives in the area, because it's just such a, there's little midwives and a lot of people that want to be midwives. So for her to reach out to me was huge at the time. And yeah, I started apprenticing with her when my oldest turned 1. And then I signed up for a formal midwifery school. And so that was huge, because I had to travel back and forth to Maine. So at the time he was 2, and I'm leaving him and going up to Maine every other month for 2 weeks at a time. And we had no money. I'm just draining our bank account to get this done, and essentially working for free in an apprenticeship. And I look back and I'm like, I literally have no idea how we survived that, but thank God we did. And then, yeah, as soon as I was in my final year of midwifery school, I was like, her volume was a lower volume practice. And I was just like, I have to get this done. We're sinking financially. And so my friend started a GoFundMe, and because I got the opportunity to go to El Paso and work on the border for an apprenticeship at a high volume birth center. And I also was offered, an apprenticeship in the Philippines to go to a really, really high volume birth center where they're doing 10 births in a day, just crazy volume.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I mean, not literally 10 births a day, but I mean, multiple births in a day. So yeah, I convinced Johnny to quit his job, which was our only money. I was like, I need you to quit your job for 6 months, and we have to travel, and I have to get this done. And without hesitation, he was just like, okay, this is what we're doing. So we packed up our 3-year-old. We drove cross country. We went to Texas. I found out I was pregnant the week we got to Texas. And I was like, it was just awful. I thought it was just the heat that was getting to me. I was like, I'm just not used to the heat here. And then I found out I was pregnant. So, we're 20 weeks pregnant. We went to the Philippines. We were there for a month and a half. And, I finished my apprenticeship as I was, finishing my second pregnancy. And as soon as I gave birth, I had to be on Zoom classes for the next 2 weeks, literally the day after I gave birth. And then I graduated and opened my practice.
And the rest was history, as they say.
Yeah. I mean, it was divine timing, because that was May of 2019. And then obviously a year later, COVID hit. And like, I went from being like, oh, like, like I'll just kind of take this like slower paced practice and take, 2, maybe 3 births a month and stay home and homeschool my kids till like, March came and it was just like a million calls a day, like just all these people that were like, we don't want to give birth in the hospital. Like we want to give birth at home. So I went from being a very like low chill practice to like very high volume, very overnight. And it worked. I liked it. I liked being just kind of thrown into it, but it was definitely intense.
Was it kind of the uncertainty of what COVID was going to be, like how it was going to affect these babies in the hospital? It was people like afraid to be exposed in the hospital,
It
or they
was
couldn't get care?
it was a mix of both. It was like people that either were like, I don't know if my husband's going to be allowed in the room if he tests positive. I don't
Mm-mm.
know, all like it was either like the uncertainty of like how the hospital was going to react, or like we're just done with the whole system. Like we didn't really want to have a hospital birth in the first place. Like we already kind of wanted a natural birth, or so it just kind of like pushed certain people totally out of the system that were already contemplating the system. And then people that were like grossed out by the hospitals also were like, let's get out of here. So it was this mix of kind of both sides of the spectrum, but ultimately everybody wanting the same thing, autonomy over their birth experience. And so, yeah, just kind of transpired from there.
It's such an important time too, right? Like it's the gateway into becoming a mom. And I know so many women who, I mean, despite circumstances and how much they try and they plan and they do whatever, right? That they just have these birth stories that are frankly traumatic, right? They're either in a hospital
Yeah.
and they don't feel like they have a say, or things go wild, right? And something goes wrong or whatever that looks like for them. And, I wonder like how how much different is a home birth than a hospital birth? Because I'll be honest, I've only been to my 2 births. That's it. I've seen wonderful birth stories. Like I took a home and like natural birth course. Both of our kids were born naturally without like any interventions, which I'm super proud of, honestly. It's like some of the most
Yeah.
proud
It's a
moments
huge
of my
accomplishment.
life.
Yeah.
And I love it. And I think like if we were, I just think about how well those went. And if the backdrop was our home, like how much better that would be. But like I almost can't even contemplate like what that would even be like. So, what are like the major benefits of home birth in your experience?
Yeah, as I look back and like working as a doula, that's what really sold me, because I, was seeing natural births and these beautiful births in the hospital. And I'm like, oh, this is great. And then I saw a home birth and it was just like an ordinary day. Her kids were downstairs. Her husband's cooking breakfast. It wasn't this huge event. It just felt so sacred and also like normal that I just like couldn't comprehend how different it felt from the hospital. And so, I think ultimately, like, I don't think everybody should have a home birth. I think that it's definitely something that like people have to feel called to. And so for me, when I got pregnant, I was just like, I understand the risks of a home birth and I understand the risks of a hospital birth. And I feel more comfortable choosing a competent home birth midwife and taking those risks at home than I do in the hospital, because I had seen how emergencies were handled in the hospital and I saw how emergencies were handled at home. And it was just like, you're in the hospital and things are done to you. Sometimes you'll get lucky and you have a nurse or a doctor or, a midwife in the hospital who is asking for your consent and, talking you through things. But oftentimes that's not the case, or that's not what I've witnessed when I've, attended hospital births. It's like, that's best case scenario. Whereas at
Mm.
home, the mom and the family, they're in the driver's seat, So like my role as a midwife is really to be the lifeguard. I'm very hands off. We're unintrusively monitoring the mom and the baby, and we don't step in unless we need to. Whereas in the hospital, it's like they're looking for things to do. So it's like, oh, you're not going as quickly as we'd like you to, or, this is happening. So it's just a very different model of care. The benefits are just, the uninterruptedness, the like not having the interventions. And we certainly use the interventions if we need to. If there's any red flags, like I always tell my clients, my goal is not for my clients to have a home birth. It's for you to be safe and healthy and your baby to be safe and healthy. And so, my transfer rate is like 12% for first time moms. So 80% of the time, my clients are having home births. The other 12% we're utilizing the hospital. Most of the time, that's just for an epidural, for pain relief, for a long labor, for IV fluids, for maternal exhaustion. It's, if you want your best shot at having a natural birth, home birth is, your best shot at that. Just making sure that you're hiring, somebody competent that's going to transfer you appropriately, that's looking out for the red flags to avoid an emergency, because I don't want to deal with an emergency. And I especially don't want to deal with an emergency at home. So if I'm noticing red flags, it's like, all right, let's transfer before the emergency happens. And a lot of the hospitals around here have been really incredible and really supportive of home birth, which has been really nice, because I know a lot of areas that's not the case. So it's been nice to work collaboratively with the hospital and have respect. Like, an OB, came out and like shook me and my assistant's hand the other day and was like, you saved this mom and this baby's life. Like, thank you so much. And that feels just really good to like have mutual respect for each other, because we're not like, I'm not anti-hospital and I don't want them to be anti-home birth,
Yeah, of course. I think that partnership is so, so important, right? Because you guys both have the same end goal, which is
Yes, the same end
safety.
goal.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's really incredible that you've been able to strike those relationships. I'm sure too that the moms coming into your practice feel comfortable, because I remember when we were considering a home birth for our second, it was ultimately Steve, my husband, who you know very well. And he was like, look, he's a worst case scenario type of guy. He's like, I want to make sure that
Yeah.
like in worst case scenario, we are totally covered. And I knew he wouldn't feel comfortable unless we were in the hospital. And I wanted him to feel comfortable so that he could support me and like be my advocate
Right.
in the hospital too. So like those types of considerations, I imagine, come up when you're like having conversations with families about what the backdrop of their birth
Oh,
is
yeah.
going to be, right?
All the time. Yeah. There's definitely a lot of dads that are skeptical and they're like, I'm going to be honest, I really do not feel comfortable with my wife choosing this, but here we are, like she's driving it. And afterwards they're like, oh my, like there's so many, like literally like so many dads that I can think of off the top of my head that are just like, when are we having the next one? Like as soon as they're like, that was amazing. That was the best experience of my life. I can't believe that I even second guessed her decision in doing this, So it's funny to see that like, come around when they experience a home birth and they're like, absolutely not. I would never, ever, you know, give birth in the hospital again. The dads and obviously the moms too. But yeah, it's nice to see that. And yeah.
I can imagine it's so nice to sleep in your bed like the night
Yeah,
after you
it's
have
like you
your
can
baby.
sleep in your bed, you can eat your food, you're just comfy. It doesn't feel like a thing, like it doesn't feel like a big event. I mean, it is a big event and it feels like a big event because it's a big event, but it doesn't feel like this big, like when you go to the hospital when you're in labor, oftentimes people's labor will slow down because there's this change of environment. The smell is different. The lights are different. There's all these people that are coming in and checking you. When you're at home, it's just like you're in your space, so you're really able to just relax. And it typically is a lot shorter of a process because there's not this transition of like, okay, let me adjust to this new environment. It's like you're in your environment. And so that really takes away hours of adjusting.
I can totally appreciate that, honestly. Because, yeah, similarly in my first birth, I remember getting to the hospital and just being like, you had to fill out all this paperwork and like
Yeah.
put your stuff down and change into a gown and like all the things that you had to do. So I remember being like, it was nice because it was kind of a nice distraction, right? Because
Yeah.
like you're laboring and you're like, okay, if they tell me to do a bunch of stuff, then it like takes my brain off the fact that like I'm laboring. But then after like you get in the bed, you're like, oh, this bed isn't as comfortable as my bed was. And I
Right.
was like
I
laboring
always
here
tell
for
people
4
that are
hours.
like, I'm like, pack your hospital bag, bring a pillow, bring something that smells like your house. Cause yeah, I mean, literally like birth is such a biological, like mammalian thing that there's so many things that we're not thinking of, but like the smell of the hospital, the just the environment as a whole, like people don't like, even if they're like landing a hospital birth, it's like, we don't feel comfortable in a hospital. You know what I mean? So
No.
you have to make yourself feel comfortable there. And for a lot of people, that takes a long time. It's such, I mean, I tell everybody like birth is so much more of a mental thing than it is physical. I mean, definitely physical as well, but you have to feel emotionally safe. You have to feel emotionally supported and really just finding peace wherever you're at. And so some people that's at home and some people that's in the hospital.
I'm super interested in a lot of like this education piece too, because like thinking through, right, this is a mental thing and a physical thing. A lot of people, and at least my experience, like I read tons of books when I was pregnant. And I had no idea that our bodies did like 99.9% of the things that they did. And
Yeah.
I think like going through and pursuing, we did a natural hospital birth, and pursuing a natural birth taught me so much more about the process, which actually did quiet that voice inside of my
Yes.
brain. Like, this is going to hurt. It's going to be
Right.
horrible. I'm going to get broken in half. And
Right.
like all the scared, anxious feelings that I felt, they started to kind of wash away the more I
Totally.
learned about how we are wired to do this process. And so, like, as you're going through schooling and as you're like helping moms plan for this experience, is education like a big core factor in
Oh,
planning?
100%. Yeah. I mean, I require all of my first time moms or anybody that's planning their first natural birth. Cause, I'll have people that have had births in the hospital with an epidural and then they want to do a home birth the next time. And for me, anybody that's planning their first natural birth, I require them to take a birth class because
Mm,
all of that comes down to understanding what's happening in your body. And if you don't understand what's happening in your body, you're going to feel out of control. You're going to feel like
yeah.
something is wrong. And so it really comes down to understanding the process, understanding the hormones, understanding, what all of it looked like, watching birth videos. I was just talking to a client yesterday and she was 17 when she attended her mom's birth, and now her 9-year-old sister is planning to be at her birth in the next couple of weeks. And, her mom and I were just talking about like, as a kid, her mom was just like, I would go outside and, I'd be with my cats giving birth, the dogs giving birth. Like I saw all
Yeah.
these animals giving birth, like seeing animals give birth, seeing, your mom or your sister or your aunt give birth, like that makes such a huge difference. When I was in the Philippines, like, it was a poor village and oftentimes all of these women had seen somebody give birth before. So they were coming in with like no fear.
Mm.
They knew what the process looked like. They knew that they could do it. And they just gave birth. Like I was amazed because, I'm coming from a place where I thought a lot of the clients were giving birth, really easily. And I'm like, oh my gosh, these women literally like are on a moped up a mountain and just like pop their baby out. And I was just totally in shock. And I think a huge part of that, even if it was their first baby, is just like one, they're physically more active. And two, they're not afraid because they've seen it before. There's nothing to fear because they know that they were meant to do it. Whereas, some of the more like Western women that were coming in who like lived in the bigger cities that, were definitely more, medically minded then and didn't live in the village and hadn't seen birth, like each generation, it's a disservice to like not see or hear about people's births because all that we've done in our society now is hear birth is scary, birth hurts, birth, like, I don't know about you, but I literally had never heard a positive birth story
I
growing up.
know.
And that's a huge disservice that we've done. So now we have to undo that. All of the women in our culture are like, I'm friggin' afraid of birth. Like how I was like, I want a C-section. Like that's all fear based. I had never seen a birth. And so, yeah, it's a huge undoing that we have to do. It's a huge unlearning and learning what, like, I don't know why they didn't teach that in sex ed, like the
No.
hormones that go on for birth and what it would be like, because it's like we were literally that we're wired to do this. I have no idea why we don't know anything about it at all.
No, I feel like my education level was so low around birth. I couldn't believe it. And I was like you, Sam. I was like, why would I suffer through birth if I could just
Yeah,
get an epidural?
right.
And even in the beginning of being pregnant with our first son, and then the more I learned about the process, because I was like, oh, I'm just going to read about this. And then
Right.
it was probably about 22 weeks in, I said to Steve, I was like, I don't think I want to get an epidural anymore. And he was like, what? Because I always said it. I was like, why would
Yeah.
I suffer? Like, why
Yeah.
would I
Why
do
would I
that
suffer?
if that can just be taken away? And like reading about cascade of interventions and how one thing leads to another. And I was just like,
Right.
wow, this feels like I'm willingly entering into like a hospital situation. Like this birth is the only time you go to the hospital, like
Yeah.
if you're not sick.
Right.
So like back to what you were saying about, the smells and the senses and all the things, like your brain is telling you, I'm here because I am unwell. You
Right.
know what I mean? And then if people start sticking stuff in you, then you're like, oh, I'm unwell. And so
Right.
then your birth
Exactly.
starts to go unwell.
Yeah. Yeah. It's yeah, the pipeline is real. And I've seen beautiful hospital births and, really hands-off providers. But like I said, that's not the norm. The norm
Mhm.
is we're going to find something wrong and we're going to do surgery or do something or give you something to speed things up because this is not going to how we want it to go. So yeah, I mean, my role as midwife is really just holding space for people within the realm of normal and low risk and like being able to provide them that safe space to give birth in and being able to transfer them if it's not no longer a safe space for them to give birth in.
I want to pivot like slightly and talk a little bit about
Yeah.
your practice because first of all, birth is so intoxicating. I feel like I could talk about birth for like 6 hours. I remember like after having birthed both of my kids, I was like, this is the coolest feeling ever, right? Like that oxytocin
Yeah.
thing is
That
super
high
duper
is
real.
literally unlike anything else in the world. Like,
I know. It's like so wild. I can't believe how incredible birth actually is. And of course, those newborn stage, months,
right.
like come with their challenges, of course. And like birth in and of itself, like when you're so close to that experience, I feel like it kind of pushes you through some of those more challenging times, like with
Oh
lack of
yeah.
sleep and lack of
You just have a
nutrition.
confidence. Like
Yeah.
the confidence after giving birth naturally. I mean, I've never given birth any other way, so I don't know. But I just remember after my first like kind of like preparing myself for postpartum depression, just in case. And I just felt like a high, like I was just like, I had come into myself in ways that I never knew were possible. Like it was just like the most amazing thing. And I was 22, like none of my friends had babies or given birth. So I was, definitely a young mom, with, going to mom groups where everybody else was significantly older than me. And I didn't feel like, what sort of like, yeah, I just felt a total lack or total amount of confidence that just can't even really articulate.
I just feel like it connects you, right? With your
It
baby.
connects you
Like
to your body. Yeah, I was fully embodied. That's how I can
yeah.
describe it. And that's just like prepared. That set me up for my whole parenting experience, which is like where I'm at now. I think that when people come out of the hospital and they're like, I don't know what just happened to my body, they feel, almost assaulted in their body. They feel, like you were saying, like just traumatized. That sets you up for not a great parenting experience. You come home, you feel anxious, you feel depressed. And how does that transpire into your whole parenting identity? You know what I mean? A lot of my clients that feel really great about their births come out with this confidence and like, they're like, yeah, I would totally give birth again. I love being a mom. And then you look at like the greater society who does not feel that way about their birth and how it sets them up for their parenting afterwards. And they're like, yeah, I feel not great about this. I really don't love this as much as I thought I was going to love it.
Hmm. It's such a shame. I do think that there's no like right or wrong way to like birth a baby,
Yeah,
right? Like we just
there's
need to
not.
make sure that like mom is healthy and safe, like you were saying before, and
Right.
baby is healthy and safe. And I think that one of the things that like natural birth specifically like opened my eyes to is just like the intention behind the design of the process, like the
Yeah.
fact that our bodies, like the fact that our nipples get darker so
Yeah.
that baby can find them, like that to me, like was one of the most like specifically standoutish and just most wild things that I have ever thought through. And like, you know how you get super sweaty like postpartum? It's also
So the baby can
because
smell you
baby can
and
smell you
yeah,
and like find where you are. And like the armpits are right next to the breast. So that like, it's just so wild to me, like how specifically crafted we are for this experience. And I think like, honestly, the reason I wanted to have this conversation is because if there is any mom who is listening, whether it's first birth, second birth, third birth, as you're growing your family and things, like if you feel like this is even something you're remotely interested in, like there are so many resources out there, Sam being one of them, so many different things that you can read, that you can get your hands on to like really make you feel confident about like what your body can actually do. So
totally. Yeah.
let's talk about your practice
Okay.
because I know that the nature of birth is I mean, listen, it's an emotional time. Sometimes things happen a little bit last minute, often probably in the middle of the night. How have you balanced like a growing, thriving, very demanding practice with a lot of the things that you have on your plate as a human being and a mother?
That is a question I get asked often, and I honestly don't know the answer. But I am apparently built different. I mean, back to Johnny, he really is the MVP. He, like, I don't know if you know, but midwives have a very high divorce rate. Like,
Oh, wow.
I want to say like 60 to 70%. But yeah, their marriages do not survive. And oftentimes, like, either their family is on the back burner, their relationship is on the back burner, they're on the back burner, or their clients are on the back burner. So for me, I really try and balance all of the things as best I can. And then, obviously I'm not perfect. So in one way or another, something is lacking in one. Yeah. Eventually something's going to lack, but really trying to prioritize. My midwife always said, like, your midwifery will always be there. Like, you have to prioritize your family and your relationship. So, I take a lot of time off. And so I've had to put systems in place so that I can take time off, because obviously I'm on call all the time. And that was hard because for the first 5 years, it was just like this hustle and grind of like, all right, I'm going to like work my ass off for X amount of months. And then I'm going to take a month off. But then it would be like, okay, then that whole month I'm not taking clients. So then I had to, find assistants and other midwives in the community to like help cover me. And then, my clients would be disappointed because they'd be like, oh, like, we really wanted you at our birth, but you're not going to be here during that. So I just recently hired a midwife to help me so that, like, it's no longer like I'm guaranteeing me at your birth. Like, I'm guaranteeing my practice. So there's 2 midwives, there's a team of assistants. You're seeing all of us prenatally. It's still very intimate. It's not as intimate as like one-on-one, but yeah, I'm literally just bridging this now so that I can really provide in all of the ways possible, so that I can start my collective, so that I'm still able to travel with my family. I'm still homeschooling. I'm still in a happy relationship. And yeah, I don't necessarily know how I do it, but it's a lot of delegating. I am a delegation queen. I am really good at outsourcing literally anything I possibly can.
Honestly, that's so incredible. I know a lot of moms, myself included, who struggle like a lot with delegation, especially on the personal side of things. I remember when our nanny in Pennsylvania started doing like house manager stuff, and she'd be like doing laundry and getting like paper towels at the house and stuff
Yeah.
like that. And I remember the first time I came into the boys' room and all their laundry was folded and put away, and I just like started crying.
Yeah.
I just like started bawling my eyes out, and I was like, well, how did I not do this earlier? How could somebody care for me in this way? Like, it was just such a weird like feeling. Have you struggled delegating, and how does it felt like?
Not at all.
Even
I mean, it just comes back to that like village mentality. And again, like, the Philippines was so impactful for me because it was like everybody takes care of each other. Like the midwives are just sitting and eating lunch, and like there was somebody in the waiting room and they'd be like, oh no, don't worry. She'll like, there's no like rush. And so I'm just like left my mentality there. I'm pretending like I am still in the Philippines. And so I guess it was like it was 2 years ago. We were on vacation, and some other mom had posted in like the moms group on our like the local Facebook group. And she was like, I'm recently widowed. Like, I am looking to just help a few families out. I have experience with cooking and cleaning and doing laundry, all of these things. And I'm like, please help me. And so I immediately reached out to her and I'm like, listen, like, I would love to help, like, have you come and help. And she was like $22 an hour or something. And I was like,
oh my
oh,
gosh.
absolutely. So she started coming. She started with once a week. And then I'm like, if you can come twice a week, that's great. So it's like, I was spending maybe $120 a week. And I was like, I was getting meals. I was getting my laundry put away. Everything that I needed done was done. And I was like, I cannot think of, I don't know why other like working families don't have this. It's like, please take all of my money and get this done. Cause now my stress levels are so low. Like, I can't do it all. Like, I think that so many moms have this, like, I need to do it all. Right. Like, and it's like, you're just burning yourself to the ground. And for what? Like, what is the reward after that? Like a little extra money in your pocket? Like, are you satisfied being the one that's doing it all? Like, I have never struggled with that. And I am just like, I really encourage anybody and everybody that can to like get help, seek help, normalize getting help. Like, in my head, it was just like, rich people have nannies and chefs and this and that. And I'm like, I'm not rich, but I prioritize my mental health and like, I'm like, I can't provide good quality of care to anybody, my family, my husband, my clients, if I'm stressed chronically, which, like, this is a very high stress job, and many jobs are high stress jobs. So like, why don't I eliminate as much stress as I possibly can? And that is where I am at in life, and I'm loving it.
Honestly, it's super inspiring. And I'm sure folks listening also feel that way because, yeah, I know so many moms who struggle or they feel like they should do everything or that like it's the marker of them being a good mom or a good spouse
Yeah.
or a good homemaker or whatever that looks like for them. But I appreciate that you've
Yeah.
been able to find like delegatable activities and like some of those smaller things because it saturates not only a lot of our time, but like a lot of our mental bandwidth, right? Like we're constantly running with like that checklist in the back of our brain of like what needs to be done.
Johnny's like, we can do this. We can clear out the freezer and organize it. And I'm like, I can do all of these. I can do laundry. I can cook. I can do many things. And I will if I want to, but I don't want to. And I don't have the time. Like I'm doing a million other things so that when I am home at the end of the day, I don't have stress like, oh, what am I having for dinner? There's already 5 meals that just have to be heated up in the fridge, or let me put
Mhm.
away all this laundry. Like I can just enjoy my kids when I'm with my kids, and I can work when I'm at work and not have to worry about all of the other things constantly because it's exhausting. And like even stay at home moms, I'm like, you need help. There's no way, like we all need a village. Like I don't like that should just be fundamentally clear. And we don't have a village anymore. Like so many people are getting pregnant later in life. They don't live near their family.
Mm.
Their parents might have died. Like we don't have the support that we had, like our parents, their parents had at some point where everybody kind of lived together and
Mhm.
yeah, the kids would all play together. That's like we're doing things in such isolation, and it's such a disservice on so many levels.
Yeah, it is hard. It really is. I think a lot of us too, with pride, maybe are like, "Oh, I can do it on my own," right?
Yeah.
And it's so challenging to like operate from that headspace because if
Right.
you really try to force it all, and then you're constantly feeling like you're dropping the ball on something, or that your kids are getting a fraction of you, right, versus
Yeah.
like the whole you, it can be. I don't know. That's I think where like mom guilt takes its roots like really
Yes.
heavily is when we start to be like, oh my gosh, I'm dropping the ball on everything. It's so challenging. Okay, this has been, first of all, amazing. I'm super glad to have heard lots of your story and hear a lot about your thriving practice. I know that this week you opened your collective. So I want to hear what's exciting about that for you right now and what kind of motivated you to take this new direction or additional direction in your professional career.
Yeah. So I mean, back to my midwife. I mean, she had always been, you know, some of the ways that I met some of like my closest mom friends to date was like she would host these prenatal potlucks where everybody who was pregnant would come and bring a dish, and we would get our checkup at the same time. And it was such a nice way to build a community with like-minded moms. And I was like, I definitely have to incorporate that. And so when I went to the
Mm.
Philippines, it was very much the same thing. Like everybody in the village would gather, they would have a childbirth class, they would all have lunch together. They would like, it was just this beautiful community. And I was like, I need to keep that going. That is what we need in our world. That's how we support moms, is being together. So, I mean, as soon as I started my practice, I did, virtual, gatherings, for a little bit during COVID. And then not long into it, I was like, no, screw this. Like we all need to be in person. So I, would host these prenatal potlucks where I'd hire or, a volunteer, pelvic floor physical therapist or um, childbirth educator or, whoever in the realm of motherhood would come and talk. And yeah, I just really wanted to then bridge that gap because, for years I've been doing it on a small scale with, my clientele. And I was just like, this needs to be like a thing for everybody. I'll get like Instagram messages like, oh, I wish that like I could do this, but I'm not having a home birth. And, or I wish I could be a part of this, like from other providers. And I'm like,
Mm.
why am I not putting this all together? Because it's hard to like open a space, obviously, and be the person that organizes. And I'm like, that's what I'm good at. Like, I'm good at gathering people. I'm good at making referrals. I'm good at building community. So, like, why am I not taking the next step and creating a space for all of that to happen? So, yeah, I just opened a collective here with acupuncturists, integrative nutritionists, pelvic floor therapists, all of these providers who I've been referring to, for years. And so it's now not only for my clients, but just the greater community to come for lactation support, for postpartum support, for baby massage, for developmental play groups. And yeah, I mean, a way to support small business, which I'm huge on, and especially mom led businesses. And yeah, I'm hoping that it, takes off and does well, because as a community, I know that we need it. And I'm, already kind of spinning my wheels on like, okay, how do I get another one open? Because, in the city, it's lacking too. There's not really spaces dedicated to moms and mothers and people going through fertility treatments to come and gather and talk about their stuff and see providers in this one kind of place.
Mm. I love that so much. Honestly, it's incredible to just have like one space where you have access to all of these different possible, I don't know, support systems, I guess, because you
Yeah,
don't know what you don't know when you have your
right.
first baby specifically. And even your second and third, it can go a little bit different. Like things you
Yeah,
might have wanted in your first, postpartum experience, you might not want with your third, right? And so that can change throughout time. And just to
yeah.
have that
Always
like
changing.
Rolodex, right, of options and opportunities, and you can choose what feels good to you and that sort of thing. I think that's really beautiful that you've created that space.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm excited about it. Yeah, just trying to like fill that up and build it in the community. And yeah, I mean, I anticipate that it will go well because, like I said, I know that it is needed, and I don't know that moms do need it. It's just convincing people that they need to get out and build community, which I think has been really hard for a lot of moms post COVID. Like moms that started before COVID and after COVID, it's a very different breed, and it's like this. It's a divide, and yeah, just trying to bridge that and get people to come back into communities.
Yeah, it is true. I am a post-COVID mom. So Frank was born in August of 2020.
Hmm.
And like we couldn't do anything. I mean, I
Yeah,
couldn't bring him like as a newborn, I was like afraid to bring him out places. I mean, you're already a little bit nervous in the very beginning and the like that first 4 months, like bringing your kiddo around. And then the fact that like, everybody was sick. It was just, I don't know, it's just something like embedded in me that like bringing our
right.
kid
That's what
out of
I'm
the
saying.
house
Like
is
it
like
just
deadly.
yeah. I think a lot of people have not mentally recovered from that, and so even if you're having, your second, third, whatever kid post that, it's just like there's this there's this lacking to like want to integrate back in a community with moms. So just ultimately trying to get that going, get that started for people.
My gosh, it's so needed. Sam, honestly, this was such a great conversation. Thanks for all the work you're doing, for how open you were today, and all the information that you gave. I hope that moms listening who are expecting or maybe in the heavy season postpartum are feeling a little bit lighter today because of everything that you've shared. But where can folks get in touch with you? Follow along with what you're doing, learn more about the collective.
Yeah, so my midwifery handle is Magpie, Magpi, midwifery. And then my collective is the Matrescence Collective. I think on Instagram, it's just the Matrescence Collective. And yeah,
We'll make sure all that's noted too, so that folks listening can get in touch with you and follow along with this incredible resource you're building for moms. Thanks so much for taking the time to chat today. I really appreciate it.